This happened to me in 2004. I was 12 years old at the time. Me and my two friends, who were the same age as me, would go exploring around our town whenever we got the chance. We would have lots of fun, as 12-year-olds do. There was this one house in particular. We loved to play there. We found out pretty young that it was abandoned. It had been abandoned for about 20 years, since the occupants died. My mum and dad remember the people who lived there, as my family have lived in this town their whole lives. From what they told me, a very much loved couple lived there. Mr. and Mrs. Tate they were called. Mr. Tate was one of the most beloved men in the town's history. He would always say hi, they said. A Ned Flanders kind of man. They lived there in the 60s and 70s and were very happy. One day, the woman took off and never came back, leaving the man on his own until he died in 1984. He never knew why she left. It was known locally as a very sad story. Me and my friends could never get into that house. It was completely locked down and boarded up. We would just play outside. One day, a violent storm passed over my town. It took quite a toll on the community. A few days later, me and my friends were casually making our way to the house, as we did most weekends. We were shocked to find a tree which had fallen and crushed the porch. It stripped the window and the boards which were covering the window. We were over the moon and took no time jumping through the window. The place was very dark. We had a quick look around. It was very eerie. There was still lots of stuff everywhere. Mr. Tate had died, and the place was left as is. Photos on the wall, dinner plates set out, clothes were everywhere. It was very creepy. Clearly he had no other family because it didn't look like anyone had stepped foot inside the house since he passed away. We had a great time. It had a very creepy basement. It was used as a storage space from the look of it because it was cluttered with boxes. We ignored the boxes and just ran around and played games. We did this for the next year. We'd go there every chance we got. It was great. It was out of the way enough that no one stumbled across it, and we never told our parents out of fear that we'd get banned. We even tried to stay the night once. I think we made it till about 7 p.m. It was such a scary place to be in. You'd hear the odd noise every now and then. But everything went smoothly, until one day, when we were really bored and just roaming around the house. We made our way to the basement, and then saw the boxes and decided to rummage through them. At first, it was just a bunch of clothes, kitchenware, other crap, until we came across photos. The photos were just the normal ones of Mr. and Mrs. Tate that you would expect from newlyweds, until they got creepy. The first of the weird photos was of a lady sleeping on the couch. She was clearly oblivious to the photo being taken, and I assumed this was Mrs. Tate. The next photo was in the same setting, but closer up to her face, and then a couple of a person stroking her face. We got really scared at this point. We found another envelope full of old photos, quickly tore it open. They were all a bunch of selfies of a man I assume was Mr. Tate. They were all of him wearing this forced, creepy smile and staring with wide eyes into the camera. There was literally about 50 of basically the same face. This man paid to develop these photos when they were all basically the same. Why? We were so freaked out, we left and didn't come back for a while. We told no one about what we found. We were just scared kids. Although we found ourselves talking about it quite often, Now that I think about it, we clearly wanted to go back, but we were just too scared. One day, I decided to ask my mum about the couple. "Why did the woman run away, Mum?" I asked. "No one knew," she said. "Perhaps she had a good reason," I said. "Well, maybe, but there's no excuse for leaving such a nice man alone without telling him why or even saying goodbye," she said. "Why do you ask?" she said. "Just curious," I replied. I personally was starting to think that the woman may have left for good reason. Maybe she feared for her safety, and maybe the man was not as kind and gentle as everyone thought. This built up in my head for a week or two. I was sure that the truth would lie in the rest of those boxes. I convinced my friends that the man was bad and that we had to solve the case. I managed to get them to come back with me. We went there when the sun was at its brightest. We entered the house, and after a few minutes of procrastination, we entered the basement. We started sifting through all the boxes. All we were finding was a bunch of old newspapers and clothes. Basically just crap. One of the boxes we opened was full of ash. It took us a while, but we eventually realized the ash was once photographs. They had been burnt to a crisp. Someone had been trying to cover up whatever was on the photos. There were remnants of object in the pictures, but they were impossible to decipher. After an hour or so, we gave up. We just started chilling in the basement, talking about normal kid stuff. Then I saw something. One of the bits of paper that we'd thrown around while looking through the boxes had fallen on the floor near the wall. What was strange about it was that it was submerged in the wall. I went up to get a closer look and realized that it was under the wall. There was a gap between the wall and the floor. I told my friends, and we started feeling around the wall, looking for anything. We noticed a cabinet against the wall. We quickly tipped it over. It revealed a handle on the wall. All three of us grabbed it and pulled as hard as we could. We heard a click and the wall swung open. It revealed a hidden room. We were astonished. I was so excited. We had just found a hidden room. It was so dark. One of my friends had a light. He turned it on and peered around the room. It was very messy. Papers, rope, bottles, and what looked like food littered the floor. My friend swung the torch around the room, and our look of excitement turned to horror when we saw something at the end of the room. It was a decomposed person tied to a chair. We screamed and ran out of the house. We quickly told my mum and dad, and they called the police. It turns out Mr. Tate was not so nice after all. He was a brutal psychopath who abused his wife for years until she attempted to leave, at which point he sealed off one of their rooms with her inside. He kept her alive for many years, subjecting her to even more abuse, until one day, when he was evidently having a bad day, he beat her senseless while tied to a chair and slit her throat. It still amazes me that he was able to maintain such a warped reputation from the community as one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Don't assume you know people.